Trust is an important part of a lasting relationship. It also helps assure that your family is financially cared for once you're gone. Here we're talking about trusts of the legal kind, and here to sort out the issue of trust is Rowel Manasan, an estate planning attorney of the Manasan Law Group in Los Angeles County. Welcome, Rowel. Thanks for making the trip up here to guest on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Okay, something very important that a lot of Pinoys take for granted: estate planning and trusts. First of all, what is estate planning?
Okay, estate is basically all the property that you have that's going to be passed on when you pass away.
Okay.
And so that includes like any debts and stuff that you also have with your property.
Okay.
Planning is the planning and preparation you do beforehand to ensure that the people you want to receive your property receive it.
Mga Nation, this is very important for all of us because if you own a home, if you have any assets, this directly applies to you and your family in the next generation. So you really have to pay attention to the things Rowel is talking about. Now, talking about passing stuff on, what is a trust and how does it work?
Okay. So a trust is a really interesting sort of legal concept or idea. Really, a trust is very simple. It's just an agreement. And there are three parties to the agreement. There is the grantor, the person who owns the property, and then there's the trustee, the person who's going to be managing that property for the grantor.
That's you guys.
Or it could be somebody that you name as well.
Okay.
Okay. And then there's a beneficiary, somebody who's going to benefit from the management of that property.
Okay.
So those are the three parties that are involved in a trust.
And who should have a trust?
Now, that's a really interesting question, and it's really kind of dependent on everybody's own personal situation. For estate planning purposes, I think it's very important for everybody to at least have a will. But you'd be surprised, a lot of people who are considering putting what's called a living trust together, those people that are contemplating that don't really know when they should get it. I think there's a lot of misconception. A lot of people think that in order to have a living trust, you need to be very, very wealthy.
That's a common misconception. Oh, estate planning, trust, pangmayaman lang yan, only for the rich people. But as long as you have what amount of property worth do you need to be considered someone who has to have a trust?
Okay, that's a really good question because, so for instance, here in California, and the laws are different in all the various states. So if you're watching this in a different state, it's very important for you to talk to your attorney into your particular state and kind of discuss what those laws are. But here in California, if you have property valued at about $100,000, and this is not just, I mean, these are just accounts that you might have. It could be insurance accounts that are paid to a minor. It could be retirement accounts that you might have. It could be just savings that you might have that total $100,000. Or if you own real property, it might be important to have a living trust.
Life insurance falls under this also, correct? No.
It kind of depends on the situation. Most of the time, life insurance doesn't necessarily require you to have a living trust because life insurance can sometimes pass on to the people that you've named as a beneficiary. And life insurance generally avoids a process that's known as probate, which is kind of the reason why a lot of people actually put together a living trust, is to avoid the probate process.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Probate is when they get money from your assets after you die. Is that the oversimplified explanation of it?
Well, it's accurate because it's funny because the term probate rhymes with hate.
Oh, okay.
Because I think most people, for the most part, probate is not a very pleasant thing, and the reason why it's not very pleasant is it does three things. One, it's a very public process, so everybody knows what you're passing on to other people. Here in California, it's very slow. It'll take probably 12 to 16 months. And probate, for a lot of people, is very, very costly, very expensive. So for instance, let's say you own a home valued at $400,000, a pretty reasonable amount. For it to go through probate, that home to go through probate, it will cost the person who is passing that on about 5% of the value of that home.
Which is $20,000.
Which is $20,000, exactly. 5% of that $400,000. And I'm not talking about the equity in the home. I'm saying whatever the cost of that home, what it would be sold. So you don't subtract out the debt. It's whatever the cost is. So it could be very substantial.
So a practical example of that is, let's say mom dies, dad dies, and what are you going to do with the house now? That's where the probate comes in. They're going to try to extract the money
Yes,
out of
exactly.
that.
So probate is a court process because what happens is, you know, you own everything under your name, right? So for instance, I would own that house under Rowel Manasan, right? In order for it to get transferred over to, you know, my heirs or the people that I care about, it has to go through this court process in order to be legitimate.
Okay.
But a fully funded living trust allows you to be able to avoid that process altogether.
Okay. Should I be worrying about this in my early 30s? You know, I hope I'm not going to die until maybe 40, 50 years from now. Is this something I should be paying attention to?
I mean, that's a really, really good question. I suppose in theory, ideally, you would want to put your estate plan maybe a week or two before you pass away.
Yeah.
I'm not that good of an attorney yet where I can predict exactly when you're going to pass away, right?
We all have this picture in our minds of, you know, okay, this very senior citizen putting together a list, okay, when I die, I'm giving the house to my eldest son. I'm giving the car to my, you know. I mean, when you're young, you don't think about this stuff.
Exactly. I mean, I know what you mean. And traditionally, that's kind of how estate planning is. But just as a really good example, I got a phone call about a week ago from a friend. And she had told me that her friend, who has a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old, was dying from cancer and brain cancer and had 4 weeks to live. And she was calling me scrambling to put this together. Now, if you have 4 weeks to live, I think that's the last thing you want to do. Is really put that together.
Definitely.
So,
okay. So again, a trust is important. Explain to us. I mean, we talked about a lot of things. So a lot of our viewers may have gotten lost in the explanation. But again, in summary, the reason a trust is important and why they have to see an attorney like yourself and not just fill out these online trust forms on the internet. Please give us sort of like a summary of the importance of this.
Okay, now the reason why I think it's very important to have a trusted advisor is that the document alone is not going to be enough. In fact, you know, I met an individual who came into my office a couple weeks ago and had gotten a trust made in through an internet provider.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it didn't work because what you have to do if you have a living trust is you have to transfer all your assets in the name of your trust, and that's what's called funding your living trust. It's got to be transferred over. When a lot of people, they put these documents together, they think, okay, I've got this document and it's good enough. And that's all I need. And so it gives people this false sense of security that I've got everything that I need done when you need a trusted advisor, because a lot of times those documents, they don't hold true throughout your entire life because the law changes, your assets change, your family changes. So
you don't want to be you don't want to be caught in that situation.
Absolutely.
And finally, just so people don't get confused, a will and a living trust, is there a difference, and what is it, if so?
Okay, so a will is really just you telling the court or you telling people that this is how you want your assets passed to, and everybody needs a will so that they can determine who receives what from your assets. Now, the thing about a living trust is it does a lot more than that, because what it essentially does is it takes ownership of the property sort of outside of your name. And if you do everything correctly, everything will be owned by this living trust and you won't owe anything. So now, when you pass away, you don't have any assets, and so you don't go through the probate process. Everything is governed by the terms of that trust. And it will be private, you know, and it will be based on everything that you had stated in that agreement to the person who's going to be handling that when you're gone, the trustee. So